Hello and welcome to the new part of my art talks, where I speak about some pieces of art that really spoke to me when they were revealed at auctions of this year. The Christie's auction house has presented this March a marvelous display of artworks by one of the most outstanding sculptors of the 20th century, the Dame Barbara Hepworth. And so today I would like to talk to you about one particular sculpture, which is the Disc with Strings. Another title of the piece is The Sun. It was created in 1969. And what appealed to me is not only the eternal simplicity and the essential meaning of the work of art, but how the idea of it surprisingly resonates with this message that the world needs today in our turbulent time. So now I would like to show you the piece, so the disc with the strings, double titled The Sun. So that's how the work of art looks like. It was created in bronze, polished bronze with strings. Barbara Hepworth was well known for sculptures of either monumental or, as she called them, arm size pieces. And so this one belongs to the category of sculptures, although the height of it, as you can see, is 47.9 centimeters. So it was conceived and created in 1969. So what we see here is the variant of the theme recurrent in Barbara Hepworth's creativity. So the oval form, she called it a primordial form, elementary form, that one of the basic forms in art. And of course, it refers to the sun form, the solar symbols. And here we have this circular composition with two circles pierced in both halves. So the whole circular form is divided into semicircular forms. They are connected, and then each semicircular form is pierced with these smaller circular shapes. And then come the other side of it. And on the other side of the sculpture, we can see these strings, how they are sewing the form. And so this is the frontal side of the sculpture, and this is the back side of it. And so we can see how the image changes, and the strings they create the dynamics of the relationship between these semicircles constructing the whole. And actually, these strings, they look like they try to make one part of the piece closer to another. It is very well visible here how the strings create the tension, the dynamism of the relationship between these um, parts of the whole. So here we can take a look at some details of the sculpture, this dynamism, because is doubled with the shades of the strings. The strings create various lines. They form this drawing on the surface of the polished bronze of this disc, which intends to be perceived as the golden disc, the sun disc. And here is a closer look to the strings again. And the structure of the piece is visible here, and we see how the sewing of the strings goes in this semicircular lines in the backside of the piece. So the sculpture is functioning in a way of a sewer and also a surgeon. And the oval forms were so typical for Barbara Hepworth's creativity. So, for example, here you can see the comparison between the disc with strings, the sun from 1969, which is in focus of our attention, and the hollow oval, which is double titled January from 1975. And in both cases, Barbara Hepworth plays with the form of the oval, the circular form, the piercing of the form in circles, and also the strings that connect to different dimensions of the sculpture. In referring to the circular solar composition, she addresses the ancient artworks and ancient mythology, such as Egyptian mythology. And Egyptian mythology was focused on the worshipping of the sun god. And the name of the sun god in Egypt was Ra. And so here in the right on the screen now, you can see the piece by Barbara Hepworth, which is called The Head, and double titled Ra from 1972. And we see the recurrent themes of circular forms going into one another and creating, in this case, the image of the head of the god. So we have the similar ideas of envisioning the god of the sun in a sculpture, the face of the god, the head of the god, the movement of the god's thoughts and his emanating energy going into the world from this God's consciousness and God's spirit. So these ideas are so important for Hepworth, and she continues working on them in different periods of her life. As for strings, Barbara Hepworth had a chance to have a close relationship with the surgeon, Norman Capener. And he invited her to view surgical procedures. And in 1940s, as a result of these observations, she created this hospital drawing series where she reflected on this theater of surgical operations. And she confessed that she saw a close affinity between the work of surgeons and the work of sculptors, and the unity of idea and purpose dictated a perfection of concentration, movement, and gesture. And so this personage of the strings came to Barbara Hepworth's art basically from these hospital drawing series. And the idea of the sculptural operation going on in her own creativity, and the idea of this curing recreation that is happening in the world, with the sun coming up and going down, and the observation of this process, and the moon coming up at night. Actually, the disc with strings, double titled The Sun, goes together as a couple, and it has a counterpart in the disc with strings double titled The Moon. You can see here they were both conceived and created in 1969. So here we can see the similarities of two pieces intended to be perceived together, and also the differences between them. So the difference is, of course, in the material, the silver material in the portrait of the moon. The face of the moon is created in this silver color, with the golden color chosen in this polished bronze in the sun image. So the difference also is in the graphics, which is created by the direction of the strings. And so when we focus our attention on the sun disk, we see how the radiation of the sun rays is represented by this direction of the strings. So here in this slide, you can see the disc with strings, the sun disk, from different perspectives. And we can see how these rays that connect the circle of the sun with the earth is is represented here. So we see here the emanation of light. And it is very interesting to know, having in mind this metaphor of sculpture being this cosmic surgeon, this idea that came to Barbara Hepworth's mind while working in drawing in this hospital. So this is kind of a surgery suing the the star of the sun with the earth, in which the rays of light are being sent to the world. So the whole creative process is like the operation of curing the world by connecting it with the sun god. And Barbara Hepworth was working in her workshop at Cornwall at St. Ives, at a distant location in England, where she moved her family at the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939. And she said that it was not this distancing from the war and from the so called political topics, social aspects, social themes in her art, moving to abstract forms, was never ever a kind of escapism. Escapism was not the thing that she was actually searching. It was the other way around. And that's what made me really deeply interested in her art. So if it was not the escape, then what was it? When in the time of war, she started moving her attention to these primordial forms, primitive forms, abstract forms, and creating the images of the earth, of the human body, of the sun, of the moon. So abstract forms, um, she saw them as a consolidation, a faith in living value. And it was for her, as she said herself, a completely logical way of expressing the intrinsic will to live, as opposed to the extrinsic disaster of the world war. And so a sculptor, she believed, should emphasize the possibilities of the development of human spirit, so that it can continue life in its highest forms. And in its insistence on elementary values, sculpture, as Barbara Hepworth put it, is perhaps more important today than before, because life's continuity is threatened, and this has given us a sense of unbalance. And the purpose of art is to return human being the sense of balance. And in the 20th century, as she said it, and we can continue this thought and say in the 21st century as well, in all these extensions of our experience, we always come back to the fact that we are human beings, biologically the same as the primitive man. And by observing and creating, we equate our bodies with our landscapes. And so the sculptor's landscape, as Barbara Hepworth used to say, is an ever-changing space and light. The forms reveal themselves as the sun rises and sets. And it is a primitive world, but it is a world of infinite subtle meaning. And so this work of art makes us see this ever-changing position of the sun and the radiation of the sun's energy, the emanation of light, and observing this emanation of light uh, really gives balance into the inner world of a human being. And that's how the sculpture returns the balance to the human soul. So today we have seen this marvelous piece of sculpture created by Barbara Hepworth, and the sound disc really stands out as a greatly and very contemporary piece of art, because this inner balance and understanding that the nature of human being needs this curing that art and only art can provide is really important for all of us in our world. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to meet you next month in our series of art talks where I speak about interesting works of art that world auction houses make us contact with and communicate and understand their ever actual meaning. So thank you very much again, and see you soon. Goodbye.